On November 22, 2005, Microsoft kicked off the next generation of video game consoles with the release of the Xbox 360. In the ensuing years, the 360 would define a generation of gamers and become the go-to console for shooting games thanks to exclusive titles like Halo 3 and thriving online communities for games like Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. During this golden age of console shooters, one other game stood on top with Halo and COD. That game was Gears of War, a third-person shooter developed by Epic Games that was first released on November 7th, 2006.
I would describe Gears of War as a third-person shooter that harnesses the gore and violence of a Mortal Kombat game with the strategy and tactics of a Call of Duty Search and Destroy-esque game mode mixed with fast movement and high mechanical skill that is required to be the best.
Gears is a third-person shooter game. It's known for defining and perfecting the use of the mechanic, the cover mechanic within a video game. Simply put, you just press A on your controller, you press spacebar on your keyboard, and your character seamlessly enters into a sliding animation, and which that can be aimed at almost any object around you on a map. And I think that's at the heart, really, of what Gears of War is all about, both in single player but also in multiplayer.
The game was an instant hit, selling more than 1 million copies within 2 weeks of its release, making Gears of War the fastest-selling Xbox 360 game at the time. In addition, the game was able to dethrone Halo 2 as the most popular game on Xbox Live, a status it would hold until the release of Halo 3 in 2007. Thanks to its incredibly successful launch and the game's universal praise from critics, Gears of War quickly set itself apart from other shooters of the time, and its exclusivity helped propel the Xbox over their main rival, PlayStation.
Well, I think you have to start off with the high time to kill nature of Gears of War. It allows you to, engage in a lot of different inputs, whether that be through wall bouncing or strafing, or just generally shots fired in those 1v1 engagements or in those team firing scenarios where it simply isn't who shoots first wins. In fact, it's the one who can outplay or outsmart their opponent with better positioning, better movement, and a combination of judging the distance in those all-important shotgun fights or using the map terrain to your advantage to ultimately get, a leg up over your opponent. And I think when you combine that with the different weapons, the sandbox that Gears of War is known for, such as the Lancer Assault Rifle, the Nasher Shotgun, you have something that is such a really highly skilled game in the multiplayer space, and no other game really has matched that kind of Gears core gameplay that it's known for.
I was actually pretty late in terms of getting access to Xbox Live. I didn't have Xbox Live until a couple months into owning an Xbox 360, honestly. I think that kind of made me miss the original generations of people who were just all about Halo, because that was kind of the majority of console, at least in my mind, were the people playing Halo 2 online. And I had experience with that. I'd go to my friend's house and he had Xbox Live, so we'd play, up way too late in the middle of the night playing Halo 2. But once I got an Xbox 360 and I got Gears, something about just the kind of darker, more gruesome nature of Gears, and given that Gears 1, the main mode that I enjoyed was execution, which is, search and destroy from Call of Duty just without the bomb. It's, 4v4 and last man standing wins it for their team. I really like that more tactical, you have one life kind of value of it, as well as, the ability, you're in a 1v3 and you can clutch and get that crazy adrenaline rush and dopamine hit. Plus the headshots in Gears were just something crazy.
Thanks to the game's popularity, a competitive scene quickly formed and Gears of War joined the Major League Gaming Pro circuit in 2007. This was during a golden age for console esports, and Gears fit right in along the likes of Halo and Call of Duty. With teams such as VVV Vision, The Insanes, Infinity, and LGD Red and Black fighting it out at the top, the first season of competitive Gears of War proved to be a huge success thanks to these LANs.
I think Gears of War has been known for its very close-knit community, both in Europe, here where I'm from, and also in the US, where it's also got a lot of, say, trash talking as well at events. And I think that's been something that's really come up a lot on your esports montages and the like, and how grueling a lot of the competition can be in how close it can be matched between the top teams and also competitive teams in the semi-pro rankings, but also just how passionate Gears players can get because it is such a unique experience. It really is truly unique, Gears of War, in that it has had to contend with the likes of Call of Duty and Halo. Of course, you had Call of Duty 4 come out just a year after, I think, Gears of War came out on the Xbox 360, and also Halo 3 around the same time that Call of Duty 4 came out too. So Gears 1 really had a 1 year period where it was allowed to set its foundation and really show what it's capable of as a game.
The first 2 years of competitive Gears built a solid foundation for the franchise, and many expected it to become one of the most popular games in the world. Unfortunately, things don't always work out. On November 7th, 2008, Gears of War 2 released, and many critics considered it an upgrade, calling it a huge improvement in every single aspect. Some of the changes that made the game single player so good ended up being a mess for its competitive scene.
I think an example of really one fundamental gameplay mechanic that was introduced in Gears 2 that wasn't in Gears 1 in any fashion was something called stopping power, where your character run speed would pretty much be grinded to a halt whenever you were shot by like a rifle or a long-range weapon. And that really hurts, I think, for a lot of players, the fluid Gears movement that it's known for, and it really slowed down the game in a lot of these peak competitive environments.
In Gears of War 2, the hammer burst was kind of the prevalent gun. Like in competitive roles, you could start with the hammer burst, and if you had somebody who was a really good hammer burst player, it was almost so oppressive that it just wasn't fun to play against. And eventually the rules got updated so that the Lancer was the starting weapon. If I'm remembering that correctly, there was a lot of like little bugs and glitches with the game that never got patched that were, frustrating to deal with. I know in terms of new content, there wasn't a whole lot of new maps that would come out that really met the needs for competitive. It kind of stuck to the same old maps.
Despite a strong debut in 2009 on the MLG circuit, with a record-setting 114-team tournament, the game quickly declined in popularity and was dropped from the circuit after its first year. By the time Gears of War 3 was released in 2011, the community was at such a low point that despite the game's good reception, there was essentially no resurgence in its competitive scene. At this point, one thing became clear.
I think that a lot of people just kind of moved on to other things. I mean, hell, even, look at someone like Nick Merckx, who went from, the world champions of Gears on Insanes to trying Halo and not doing great in Halo Reach at MLG DC, and then eventually switching to Call of Duty and now getting to where he is. But like Gears 3 did, kind of birth a new generation of players. A lot of players who, at least to my knowledge, weren't as relevant or as known, or maybe not even around at the time in Gears 2, kind of popped up during the Gears 3 days and really made a name for themselves in the competitive scene.
On January 27th, 2014, news broke that Microsoft bought the rights to Gears of War from Epic Games, and that Black Tusk Studio, now known as the Coalition, would be taking over development of a new Gears of War title. Following the change in studio and the announcement of Gears of War 4, Microsoft capitalized on the hype by releasing Gears of War Ultimate Edition. This remastered version of the original game saw older players return to the scene and a new competitive community begin to form. Soon, ESL started a Pro League for the game. However, the Pro League format would be short-lived, as it was announced that for Gears of War 4, MLG would be returning once again to run a pro circuit, with $1 million in prize pool money.
And then we went to Columbus and we walked into the studio. It was at the MLG studio. We walked in kind of early one day to start warming up for matches, because it wasn't an open tournament, but there was a lot of teams there. We started warming up and they were kind of doing like the rehearsals, and we saw the video, the announcement video of $1 million prize pool, and we started losing our shit. And they eventually came over and don't say anything, don't tell the other teams, let this kind of get announced, and that way we can film the excitement and the hype and everything. But don't say anything. You weren't supposed to see that. I remember feeling over the moon, and to us, we kind of saw that the ESL Pro League's format didn't quite work for Gears. And I think that's true for a lot of the traditional console games, is if you really want to foster that community, especially since they're a little bit more niche compared to a game that's free to play like League of Legends or Dota or Counter-Strike now. You kind of need that big open event where any little, Timmy can show up to the event and prove themselves and make a name, right? I think that's what the community loves, is that atmosphere and that live energy, and really thrives off that. So I think that format switch from Pro League to the open events with MLG was the right call.
Eventually, Gears of War 4 released on October 11th, 2016, and the first season of the Pro Circuit went pretty well. The Las Vegas Open hit a peak viewership of 43,000 viewers, and although Gears of War wasn't going to become a Tier 1 esport anytime soon, it was clear that there was a mix of old school fans and brand new players coming together to revive Gears of War esports. However, one big decision regarding the balancing of the game presented an issue that divided the game's community.
So the game didn't have one kind of balancing system between the weapons and whatnot. It had two. One was called core tuning and one was called the competitive tuning. Unfortunately, that really divided the game in half seemingly. And even before we get on to say the esports level, from a fundamental multiplayer level, as you go in and search for ranked matches, you have some of the modes, the more casual modes, admittedly more popular modes, with the core tuning, which played very similarly to Gears 3, had very similar damage values and whatnot, and time to kills as, say, Gears 3. But the comp tuning was much more akin to, say, a Gears 1 style of play in many ways, where the shotgun didn't have as much range. The Lancer would not down anywhere near as fast. The rifles, the different weapons didn't have as much of an impact. And it really fundamentally changed the game, where it fundamentally was two different games at that point.
Heading into the second year of the Pro Circuit, numbers were beginning to dwindle once again. As a result, a decision was made. After the second season of the Pro Circuit, the competitive circuit for Gears 5 would be run by PGL.
I think that there was a lot of good for those open events. I just think as time went on, we definitely saw the attendance of the events start to dwindle, right? Like there wasn't as many teams signing up, there wasn't as many spectators going, unless we were in Mexico. In which case, it didn't matter how far into the game's life cycle we were in, the fans in Mexico showed up every single time. And so I just think as they switched back to that other format, it was probably more of a decision for that reason of, how the attendance of these events is going, rather than like, oh, what esports structure makes more sense.
Just as the game looked like it was about to make a comeback, there was one major roadblock: the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think the pandemic had a significant impact to the longevity of the Gears 5 Pro League, Pro Circuit as it were, and the different prize pools and whatnot, and seasons that were integrated by Microsoft. Simply put, when we removed, or unfortunately were forced to remove those major in-person events due to the pandemic, we didn't bring in the viewership that we once had on Gears 4. We didn't have the same amount of interest from players as well as they wanted to play in those major events in person. And perhaps some of the players as well thought, maybe their performances would have been far superior in person than online, given the really high skill nature of Gears of War, where the smallest variables can make a big impact, like whether you're playing on LAN or across the internet, in different regions. I think it would have had a longer competitive lifespan, Gears 5, as a result, simply because any performance metric or KPI you use to rate an esports success, I think they would have all been up much higher if it weren't for the damage that the pandemic really brought to the Gears esports space, not only here in Europe, but across the entire globe.
With viewership dropping, key players leaving and retiring, and interest in the scene reaching an all-time low, Coalition made a tough decision. On March 15th, 2022, it was announced that the ongoing 2022 season would be the final season of Gears Esports. Shortly after, on June 26th, the final match of competitive Gears of War took place between Rise and the Pittsburgh Knights, with Rise coming out on top, being crowned the Summer Major champions and the final champion for competitive Gears of War.
Refuses to back down. 302.30 is where this will end, and Rise will be back-to-back champions. They win the Gears Summer Major, and what an amazing moment.
Something I do think that's interesting about Gears is how many amazing talent are how many amazingly talented people the Gears community has really produced. Like looking at somebody like Mental, who went on to play in the CDL and is now a Halo Infinite Pro player for Shopify. Or looking at somebody like Nick Merckx, who is the biggest, or if not one of the biggest, if not the biggest streamer on Twitch. High Distortion, who was a really big streamer during the Fortnite days. Or CDN the Third, who's still a very big variety streamer. There's just so many amazing names that have come out of the Gears community, and all of that was in there the whole time, just really not either getting the light of day due to how early on it was in the case of, CDN or someone like that, or just, not the right orgs or support in there. So I think, the Gears community really brings amazing personalities and opportunities to people. And I think that with a new title potentially coming out, I'm excited to see who that next group is, who that next generation is. Because realistically, even if I got the band back together, right? Even if it was Kenny and Mental and Explosive and Icy and Summons or whoever, Praised and Solars, it's probably not going to be that same level as the next young generation of players who are just in love with the game and grinding it. So I think that's something almost more than the title itself that I'd be looking forward to, is given the amazing track record of Gears and the talent that it produces, who would be that next up?
Ultimately, no matter what the future of the Gears of War franchise may look like, the title and its esports scene will be remembered fondly by many during the golden age of console shooters, and its legacy will continue to live on. This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to B, Cloud, Shampoo, Spartacus, and Yashichi for being Platinum supporters, and an extra special shout out to Steph and Jack for being our Diamond supporters. We hope you're enjoying the content. If you want to talk to us, check out our Discord. If you want to support our channel and get info on unreleased videos, check out our Patreon. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah. Thanks for watching.